Well, hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I've got a ticket to Daytona Beach and you're coming along with me.
And as usual on my channel, I'm not focusing on what's inside my 737 or what the service is like. I'll be bringing you air traffic control with commentary from Atlanta to Daytona Beach, where we made some unexpected turns before the final approach course before landing. Come join me on a situationally aware short hop and discover how you can make the most of an everyday flight.
Right before my flight to Daytona Beach, I'm just stopping at the Delta Sky Club. I got my chicken thigh. It's actually pretty good.
With barely any service on my upcoming 1-hour flight, I nourished myself at the Delta Sky Club at the T-gates. There are many choices of food, but the best choice I made was to go to a window for a view of the ramp between the T and A gates and to spot the 737-800 at gate Alpha 2 that will take me down to Daytona Beach. As boarding approached, I worked my way out of the Sky Club, which is on an upper level, to go down to the gate level. And in order to get to the A concourse, I need to travel under the ramp between T and A. I chose to walk and thought about the planes taxiing above me.
Greetings from Zimbabwe. Not really. Greetings from Atlanta. They've got this great exhibit about art from Zimbabwe in the connector between T and A here. I'm just walking instead of taking the train because it's a short distance to my next flight.
After that, I ascended to the A gates and walked to the end to get to gate Alpha 2.
Hustle, bustle. That is what this airport is all about.
Alas, I made it to my gate.
Welcome to Delta 2299 to Daytona Beach.
Flight 2299 is a 2-leg flight from Atlanta to Daytona Beach and back to Atlanta today, and this 737-800 series will be taking me and you on its first leg before it returns to Atlanta later today.
Welcome aboard.
With just 2 rows behind me, I'll get some nice views of wing action, and to help with filming, the 737 windows are of a good size. Today's flight is not full, and that's especially true for the rear of the plane, which is one of several reasons why I often sit back here.
The doors are closed, there's actually nobody behind me, and we're ready to go.
Who doesn't like a plane with empty seats around them? Before we push back, let's listen into portions of the latest airport information called ATIS, which provides important airport information to the flight deck crew. I've cut most of it down, but kept parts of it that are pertinent to today's flight.
Atlanta Airport departure information Victor. Wind 080 at 6. Visibility 8. 2,400 Ketters. Ceiling 6,500 Broken. 8,000 overhead. Simultaneous departure. Departing runways 8 right, 9 left. Advise on initial contact. You have information Victor.
Welcome aboard, and thank you for flying with Delta.
With the latest airport information received in the flight deck, including current weather conditions and runways in use for departure, we begin our pushback from the gate under the guidance of the ramp controller. The tug pushes us backward while our engines remain off. The ramps at Atlanta are wide and efficient, and the ground crews conduct an excellent operation here. Our goal on the surface of the airport is to get to runway 9 left, one of 2 runways mentioned in ATIS as departure runways. Our pushback is the first movement we take to get there. Since our gate is at the end of the A concourse and the taxiway is right outside of our area, we'll be spending minimal time on the ramp once the tug is removed. As a matter of fact, right after pushback, the tug is removed and we start our engines and call ground control for clearance to taxi to the active departure runway for us today.
Ground over 2299, 1 South Victor.
2299, runway 9 left, Mike 2, taxi Lima, Lima 1.
Lima 1, Delta 2299, 9 left, Mike 2.
Endeavor 4824, monitor tower on 193.
193, Endeavor 4824.
Delta 2299, the 900 series RJ at Lima 1 will be your sequence, tower 193.
Okay, behind the RJ, it's Lima 1 for Delta 2299. And you did say monitor tower for Delta 2299?
Correct, 193.
See ya.
Wow, that was a lot of information for us, and it came in expeditiously. Based upon what I heard, I have a sense that we'll be in the air real soon. We checked in with the ground controller while pulling out of ramp 1 south, and we indicated that we listened to the latest ATIS broadcast, Victor, which you and I just listened to. The ground controller told us to taxi to runway 9 left, and we'll be entering the runway at taxiway Mike 2, and the way to get there is to taxi via taxiways Lima and Lima 1. We're actually very close to the point where we'll be entering the runway. And just over the wing, we can actually see an airplane that's taking off on the runway that we'll be taking off on. The ground controller then told an Endeavour flight to monitor the control tower frequency for runway 9 left. Then we were told that the RJ900 at Lima 1 will be our sequence. He was referring to that Endeavour Air flight that we just heard that was told to switch to the tower frequency, and then we were told to switch to the tower frequency. That was really fast. So fast that the pilot came back just to double check that we could switch to the tower frequency. We are literally number 2 for takeoff, and we just left the ramp. So how is this possible at the world's busiest airport? Well, there are multiple runways here that can be used for separate operations, almost operating like separate airports or airports within an airport. And dividing traffic into smaller sectors means simultaneous operations can occur all at once, just like we heard on ATIS. We've joined taxiway Lima as prescribed by the controller. This direction brings us toward the departure runway, and when we get to taxiway Lima 1, we'll make a left turn. Taxiway Lima 1 becomes taxiway Mike 2, and that leads to the runway. Taxiway Mike 2 is just one taxiway short of the full end of the runway. The runway is 12,390 feet long, so we'll have plenty of runway for our takeoff roll. There's one taxiway between us and the runway, taxiway Mike, and we'll cross that taxiway just before entering the runway. Taxiway Mike is the taxiway that Endeavour Air CRJ900 series that the controller told us will be our sequence will be on. We'll wait for this aircraft to pass in front of us. This plane will turn onto taxiway Lima 1, and we'll follow it to the runway hold short line until we're told to enter the runway. As a Boeing 757 begins its takeoff roll on the runway, the Endeavour Air CRJ900 comes into view on the left-hand side of the aircraft. We'll be taking off directly behind this airplane. So we're actually going slower than that airplane to allow it to take off in front of us. Can you believe that we pulled out of the ramp just a minute and a half ago, and we'll be on the runway in just 2 minutes? That's a total of 3.5 minutes of taxi time on active taxiways of the world's busiest airport. That's partly thanks to multiple runways being used for various operations today. We're now moving at the same speed as the CRJ900, keeping it in sight as we wait for that plane to turn left to the runway, and then we'll turn left behind it. At this point, the tower is now going to tell that Endeavour Airlines aircraft to line up and wait on runway 9 left.
Endeavour 4824 tower, runway 9 left and Mike 2, line up and wait.
Unfortunately, I could not capture the pilot's readback, but the Endeavour flight was told to line up and wait on runway 9 left at taxiway Mike 2. Our flight deck crew heard that, which means that we know that we can now continue up to and hold short of runway 9 left at taxiway Mike 2. There will be some paint lines on the ground indicating where the entry to the runway begins, and we can't pass that until we're told to line up and wait. You can see from the sign in the sign cluster that taxiway Mike 2 is ahead. In the meantime, the tower controller is having aircraft that just landed on parallel runways cross the departure runway to get to the terminal area before the Endeavour Air CRJ900 can be cleared for takeoff. This can slow down the departure flow, but the tower often clears multiple aircraft across the runway from various taxiways at the same time. Once all crossing aircraft are clear and the previous departing Boeing 757 is far enough from the airport, the Endeavour Air CRJ900 is cleared for takeoff.
Endeavour 4824, and that's the lightest, showing 9 left and Mike 2, clear for takeoff.
Now that the Endeavour Air is cleared to move down the runway and take off, we're now told to line up and wait.
2299, runway 9 left and Mike 2, line up and wait.
We're moving without stopping. Now that we can enter the runway, there's no need to stop at the hold bar at the runway's entry point at Mike 2. As we move along, you can see that there's another aircraft that will take off behind us, and the Endeavour Air CRJ900 can now be seen picking up speed down the runway. Now there are no more arriving aircraft near our runway that need to cross, so the tower will issue us takeoff clearance right away. We can now take off without stopping.
Delta 2299 on as a grid, showing 9 left and Mike 2, you're cleared for takeoff.
The tower told us that we need to fly the RNAV departure to Grits. This is part of a departure procedure called the Varsity 1 departure, and an airspace fix called Grits is our first waypoint before we proceed to the south toward our destination in the state of Florida. I know that you all like to listen to engine sounds as we take off, so I'll let you listen in to these engines. As we leave airport airspace, the tower controller tells us to contact the departure controller.
Delta 2299, come departure.
Yes.
I'll resume ATC when we get closer to our destination. For now, I want you to think back to the ATIS we listened to earlier. Remember the weather conditions? Well, we're experiencing it now. You'll recall that the visibility was just 8 miles and cloud layers were scattered at 2,400 feet, broken at 6,500 feet, and overcast at 8,000 feet. And we're experiencing these weather conditions right now as we climb. Weather plays an important role in flight, of course. Our departure route on this RNAV procedure calls for a right turn to the southeast to a spot called Grits. That's followed by a turn to the south to an airspace fix called Heisman, followed by a slight turn to Trophy. If you put them together, you get Heisman Trophy. The actual Heisman Trophy is an award to the most outstanding player in college football. If you can figure out why this departure procedure references this, let me know in the comments section below. After Trophy comes Varsity and Noki before we proceed on course in a southerly direction under the control of high-altitude air route traffic control centers. With many clouds en route and little air traffic, I didn't film much at our cruising altitude, but it's time for us to start on down to the Daytona Beach airport via the Thor 3 arrival, so why not check in with Daytona Beach Approach Control?
Daytona Approach, Delta 2299, passing 1867 via the Thor 3 Delta.
American 22, Christian Delta 2299, Daytona Departure, or Christian Daytona Approach, Roger, Daytona altimeter 3020, thanks for Delta, you can expect the visual runway 7 left.
3020, 7 left, Delta 2299.
We checked in at 18,000 feet, and the controller told us that we can expect a visual approach to runway 7 left. We'll eventually receive radar vectors to the final approach course. As we descend, I'll let you listen in to ATC communications with other aircraft, and at times I'll talk over those transmissions to explain what's going on. As we proceed toward our destination, the controller has us turn to a heading of 150 degrees and to descend to 8,000 feet.
2299, turn left heading of 150, descend and maintain 8,000.
All right, so maintain 8,000, say the heading for Delta 2299.
Delta 2299, left heading of 150.
150 and 8,000, Delta 2299.
The 150-degree heading, or southeast heading, puts us over the Atlantic Ocean. Daytona is a busy airport today, and we'll actually head away from the final approach course before proceeding onto it. This part of the descent is in the clouds, but we'll clearly be below the clouds before we land since the controller told us that we'll have a visual approach to the runway today. And we're getting lower as the approach controller has cleared us down to 8,000 feet for now. Eventually, we'll need to head back toward the coast and inland. Runway 7 left has a heading of 72 degrees, which points toward the Atlantic Ocean. So in order to be able to line up at the runway, we'll need to turn inland to the right, north of the airport, then proceed for several miles inland on what's called a left downwind leg. Then make a left turn to the south, also known as a left base leg, then make a left turn to join the final approach course visually on a heading of 72 degrees to line up at the runway and land with clearance from the control tower. The sun is setting in the west and is in a perfect position to cast our 737-800 shadow on the clouds for a brief moment before we descend into the deck. It's a majestic sight and made up for the fact that there wasn't too much to see in the en route phase of flight today. I'm looking forward to our approach. I'm expecting to see a lot more later on since we'll need to proceed inland. If we were to land on the same runway in the opposite direction, we'd likely head out further to sea, then make a right turn toward the land, and we'd only be able to see the land while on the final approach course, especially from this seat on the left side of the plane. If seated on the right side, I'd likely be able to see the Florida coast before landing in the opposite direction. In any case, my seat is on the left side of the airplane because I checked the wind and I knew we'd be landing to the east, and I want to see the airport before we land. For the passengers that are seated on the right side of the plane for the approach we'll be taking, they'll be seeing the Florida coast now, and we'll get a great view of the shoreline as we dip our wings to the right, but after that it should be all left-hand turns. Remember that this channel is also about seat selection, and it's not about comfort or proximity to the lavatory. It's about the view, and for this flight, a seat on the left side of the plane provides the greatest reward. And that's it. Well, just make sure that when you choose a seat, you sit in front of or behind the wing so you can see down. Oh, and check a seat map first to ensure that the seat isn't missing a window. Middle or aisle seats are out of the question. Have you had any experiences where you booked a window seat for the view, but there was no window or the window wasn't properly aligned to look out? That can severely reduce the enjoyability of your flight. A window seat is a window to the world. Too bad so many passengers had their window shades down. The view that we have right now is actually of the Atlantic Ocean. We really can't see it too well because of the cloud cover, but it is a very, very beautiful evening for flying, so I'm taking it all in right now. The approach controller is going to give us a slight turn to the right, 10 degrees to a heading of 160. In the next transmission, it'll be hard to hear the controller, but you'll hear our pilot acknowledge the turn to the right. Then you'll see the wing rise for the slight right 10-degree turn.
160.
160 now, Delta 299.
Just north of Daytona Beach is the city of Ormond Beach. In several miles, Ormond Beach will be on the right side of the aircraft. It's just past Ormond Beach where we'll begin our left downwind leg to the landing runway. In order to execute this leg, we'll have to make a right-hand turn, and since we're under the control of the approach controller, we'll have to wait for the controller to call our turn. There's a lot going on, but we won't be able to turn until the appropriate moment. But it's not that simple.
Remember that if you're not subscribed to my channel, you're missing out on one of the most interesting and inspiring aviation channels out there, so consider subscribing so you don't miss my next video.
So if you've ever been a passenger in an airplane and you know that you're close to the airport, but you keep making turns, it's likely the result of the air traffic controller giving you radar vectors so that you can fit in behind other aircraft that are also either going to the airport, departing from the airport, or simply passing through the airspace. We have 14 minutes to go before we can touch down. Approach control will first give us a new heading to the right that will bring us even closer to the coastline before we turn completely inland. And since we're getting closer to landing, the controller will have us descend to a lower altitude, this time to 5,000 feet. Again, with some of these transmissions, I was unable to pick up the controller issuing the command, but I'm confident in what the controller said since the pilot read everything back, and as soon as we were given the new heading, we turned right. Let's listen in.
200 down to 5,000 for Delta 299.
So with this turn, we get closer to land and we descend to 5,000 feet. We're in the vicinity of the shoreline of Flagler Beach right now, and the following city will be Ormond Beach. If we were to keep this heading, we'd be intercepting the shoreline too close to the Daytona Beach airport, so it'll be necessary for us to turn further right in a bit. In the meantime, I'm going to have you listen into the approach controller. Actually, the next few transmissions cover two approach control frequencies covering a broader area, so you'll hear a radio scanner cover the two frequencies, and it'll halt when a transmission is occurring.
Number 2 and enter 6 Victor, Roger, you can expect the ILS, runway 7 left 5% heading, maintain 5,000 vectors for that, and you said you had Delta?
Look at the Delta right now, and we'll maintain the present heading 5,000 for the ILS.
Daytona Evening Challenger 258 Golf Charlie 7000 Delta for the RNAV 7 left available.
1885 at Fred 530. Thanks for Delta Daytona altimeter 3020. You can expect the RNAV runway 7 left. Set to maintain 6,000 for present heading.
Present heading 6,000. And we'll expect the RNAV 7 left takeoff, Charlie.
Approach Epigraph 578 at 2,600, climbing to 3,000.
Epigraph 578 Daytona, approach climb, maintain 4,000.
Climbing to 4,000, Epigraph 578.
Fighting 190 Vector ILS 7 left. 471 fighting 190 Vector ILS 7 left.
Daytona Bonanza 2036 Papa level 5,000.
Bonanza 2036 Papa Daytona, approach Daytona altimeter 3020.
3020 365.
Number 36 Papa, as you join at 360, heading on hot traffic 12 o'clock and 10 miles opposite direction, Cirrus level 4,000.
You want me to go up to turn 360, you said?
That's what they should have given you when you're going direct Worms right now.
Direct Worms, that's correct.
Okay, yep, and then once you turn to Guano, that'll be a 360.
Okay, we are at the point where we can start our left downwind leg by being issued a right turn. This turn will be to 290 degrees, which is actually 40 degrees northwest of a parallel path to a true downwind leg to our landing runway, which will be 250 degrees. The airport is so busy in the downwind leg today that we're actually moving away from the pattern.
2299, turn right heading of 290.
Right turn 290, Delta 2299.
Alas, I'm excited about this 290-degree heading because it will bring us over the land, and I really haven't seen much since our takeoff of Atlanta. I would have preferred a heading of 250 degrees, which would be closer to the airport, but this will do. As the right wing dips, showcasing Ormond Beach on the right side of the airplane, we finally begin to see the Barrier Islands of Florida. And between the Barrier Islands and the mainland, we see the Intracoastal Waterway, which runs from Massachusetts to South Florida. In the distance, we can see Port Orange and the Ponce Inlet, one of the few inlets in this area connecting the Intracoastal Waterway to the Atlantic Ocean. As we finally get to see the city of Daytona Beach, the controller clears us down to 4,000 feet.
710 4,000, Delta 2299.
2299, or description.
That's Daytona Beach below, and the city is located on both the Barrier Island as well as the mainland. With a population of around 72,000, the city is known as the world's most famous beach and the spring break capital of the world. It's a popular place, but I'm equally excited about seeing the Daytona Beach International Airport, which is very easy to find from up here because it's adjacent to the large Daytona International Speedway, home of the Daytona 500. The runway that we'll be landing on runs right to left just above the speedway. We could essentially be there in a matter of minutes, but that can't happen. You've been listening to air traffic chatter as I've been talking, and approach control is handling flights that are ahead of us. There's so much traffic today that the current approach controller can't handle it all, and will have to hand us off to another controller, despite us being so close to the airport. First, we'll receive a turn to the left, then finally fly in the exact opposite direction of landing. As we approach Interstate 95, we'll be given a new frequency to switch to.
2299, turn left heading of 250. 2299, contact Daytona Airport 125.8.
125.8, Delta 2299.
We're turning left to a heading of 250 degrees. That's Interstate 95 below. Let's check in with the second approach controller for Daytona Beach Airport.
Daytona approach, Delta 2299, 4,000, 250 on the heading.
Okay, Delta 2299, Daytona approach, descent and maintain 2,000.
Maintain 2,000, Delta 2299.
Daytona Challenger 258 Golf Charlie, we are 4,600, sending 4,000.
Remember 258 Golf Charlie, Daytona approach, descent and maintain 3,000.
Sending 3,000 with Delta for Golf Charlie.
Okay, we're heading 250 degrees on the new approach control frequency, and I wanted you to listen in to November 285 Golf Charlie, who also checked in. That's a Challenger 600 aircraft, and it's coming in from the south. Just be aware that this plane is inbound to the same airport as us. The controller is about to tell that aircraft to descend to 1,600 feet. That's lower than what we're cleared down to.
466250. Challenger 8 Golf Charlie, descend and maintain 1,600.
1,600, descend 8 Golf Charlie.
As we continue inland, my eyes are glued to the airport for as long as possible. I'm expecting the controller to have us turn to the left for a left base leg after some time, and once we're near the extended center line of the runway, we'll turn left again, line up with the runway, contact the control tower, and land. It's a typical and standard procedure at any airport. Runways, of course, don't always head in the same direction that you're coming from, so procedures have been created to get you to the runway in a pattern, and we need to be lined up with the runway several miles out. Some airports can only accept traffic from one direction, or traffic may be routed in one direction depending on the current runway configuration. As we continue along, we move into a less urbanized area. In my mind, I'm thinking, how far out are we going to go? A descent to 2,000 feet brings us low, which to me is an indicator that approach control will have us turn to the left soon. However, as you know, we're not the only aircraft coming into this runway, as the Challenger ahead of us has been cleared to a lower altitude and will land ahead of us. Therefore, approach control is having us extend our downwind leg for a further duration to allow the aircraft from the south to fly a right base leg and a right turn to line up with the runway and land. Then we'll turn inbound behind him. And that's how airport approach control works near an airport. What's going to happen now is interesting. The controller is about to tell us to turn left, and immediately after that, he'll have the Challenger turn right. These actions feed both planes toward the final approach course coming from opposite directions. Let's listen to the controller talk to us, and then the Challenger.
Delta 2299, turn left heading 160.
160, Delta 2299.
Remember 8 Golf Charlie, turn right heading 040, join the final.
Right turn 040, the final for 8 Golf Charlie.
We were given a heading of 160 degrees, or southeast, and the Challenger was told to fly a 40-degree heading and to eventually join the final approach course when intercepting it. Once the Challenger intercepts the last turn, a right turn is made to line up with the runway. However, something isn't right with the spacing between us and the Challenger. On our 160-degree heading, we're just too close to the Challenger, and although a left turn to get to the runway would be logical, it can't happen, and the only option is for the controller to have us turn to the right, away from the airport. The controller, looking at his radar scope, is carefully assessing the situation. What can be done here? Well, the best thing to do would be to turn us to a 240-degree heading. Yes, that brings us in the opposite direction of landing, but it ensures that we have enough separation between us and the traffic ahead, and then we can land behind that air traffic once everything is fine.
2299, turn right heading 240, vector for traffic.
240, Delta 299.
We were told to turn right to a heading of 240 degrees for traffic. That's southeast and away from the airport. If you're an observant passenger, this heading just would not seem logical without understanding what the situation is. We were given our heading of 160 degrees prematurely, and that put us too close to the traffic ahead of us, so this is the best place for us now to ensure enough space in front of us. But this also adds some time onto the flight. But there are no worries. Airlines pad in time to their arrival times to make room for all kinds of situations that can lead to a later ETA, and this is just a small example of something that will lead to a later than expected time to our destination. There were no weather delays and no operational issues at all. As a matter of fact, we got off the ground in Atlanta really expeditiously today. As we approach the DeLand area, we're finally told to turn back to the left.
Delta 2299, sorry about that. You can make a left turn again, heading 140 for the visual approach 7 left.
Heading 140, Delta 2299, no worries.
The Challenger ahead of us is already lined up with the runway, on the tower frequency, and cleared to land, so our 140-degree heading brings us back so we can wind up in a position safely behind the Challenger. We went out so far that we're actually in the vicinity of DeLand, a city to the west and south of Daytona, but from this far away, the pilot is looking out the window to see if he can see the airport, and he notices it and reports it to the approach controller.
Delta 2299 has field sight.
Delta 2299, thank you, clear visual approach, runway 7 left.
Clear visual approach 7 left, Delta 2299.
Okay, finally, now that we have the airport in sight, we're cleared for the visual approach to runway 7 left. This means that we can proceed toward the airport visually, so any subsequent turns that you see us make will be initiated by the pilot and not the approach controller. It's up to the pilot now to find a point far out enough that will allow the aircraft to be lined up with the runway so that a straightened approach can be executed. We're on the outskirts of the DeLand area, and just like a few moments ago, there will be less civilization as we return to the area between DeLand and Daytona, but the highly populated side of Daytona is on the other side of the airport. So if we were to have landed in the other direction, we would have seen more. We're still on the approach control frequency, but in a moment he will tell us to switch to the control tower. The control tower controller is located on the airport and handles traffic within the airport traffic area, which includes airplanes on approach looking for landing clearance. It's now time to leave the control of the approach controller, and he's going to switch us to the frequency for the control tower.
2299, tower 120.7, good day.
20.7, Delta 2299, good day. Tower Delta 2299, visual approach runway 7 left.
Delta 2299, Daytona Beach Tower, wind 13012, 7 left, clear to land.
7 left, clear land, Delta 2299.
Okay, we have checked in with the control tower and we're clear to land on runway 7 left. In the cockpit, the flight deck crew can go through their checklist and make final preparations to land, including lowering the landing gear of this 737-800. Still in the air ahead of us is the Challenger, but this aircraft is well ahead of us and will land shortly without any conflict to us. With no conflict, the tower has nothing to tell us, and the next communication we will receive will be to clear the runway once we're on the ground and have slowed down sufficiently so that we can vacate the runway. Since the airline terminal is to the left of the runway, we will be vacating the runway to the left, and it will be a very short and non-stop taxi to the gate where this flight will terminate and all passengers will disembark. But for the crew of this flight, the pilots and the flight attendants, they'll be remaining on board as a new set of passengers joins them for the flight back to Atlanta under the same flight number. Let's land on runway 7 left.
Challenger 8 Golf Charlie, where you parking, is it?
Shelton.
Alright, Golf Charlie, roger. Continue on the runway and left at with 8, ground point 9.
Left that whiskey, point 9, 8 Golf Charlie.
Daytona Tower, good afternoon. 59 Pop Whiskey, will follow 1737 left with your parking Delta.
9 Pop Whiskey, Daytona Beach Tower, 7 left, clear to land, wind 13011.
No wind, 7 left, 59 Pop Whiskey.
Tower engine 192 just to verify touch and goose.
Aircraft last transmitting was on Daytona Tower.
Yes sir, Jetty 192, just to verify collect touch and goose, 7 right.
Okay, my apologies, place something different. Jetty 192, affirmative, 7 right, you are clear for the app.
7 right, give the option, Jetty 192.
As we slow down, the tower controller instructs us to turn left on taxiway November 7 so traffic can cross the runway ahead of us and to contact another controller in the tower, the ground controller.
Delta 2299, November 7, if you can make it, ground point 9, or traffic will be crossed downfield.
November 7, we'll make it, and ground point 9, Delta 2299.
As we clear the runway, we check in with the ground controller, informing him that we're going to gate 6 in the airline terminal.
Delta 2299, going to gate 6.
Delta 2299, Daytona ground, taxi via November.
Taxi to the ramp, Delta 2299.
And that's it. We're done with ATC and can taxi to the ramp on our own. A marshaller will greet us at the gate to marshal us in. So what did you think of that approach to DAB? Let me know in the comment section below.
All right, well, it's great to be on the ground here in the state of Florida. Well, thanks so much for watching this video. Remember that if you're not a subscriber to my channel, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to get alerts when I publish great new videos like this. Thanks, everybody, and see you all very soon.